So I'm here with Jim Ruland. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I wanted to talk to you. You've written a number of books on punk rock music, and you write for the LA Times, and you have a great blog, the Substack, which I'm subscribed to. But I kind of wanted to talk about the Make It Stop book, which is your latest book from 2023. Is that when that came out?
Yep.
Yeah, I read it last fall, and you create this dystopian world that's sort of familiar to what's happening now. Not because of women's health and uh, health care for women, and but there's also this kind of punk rock undertone to it. So did that have much influence in creating that world and some of those characters?
Absolutely. In that, I had this, idea for the protagonist to be this, underground group of vigilantes
Hmm.
that go up against the healthcare system,
Hmm.
uh, specifically around the healthcare system surrounding drug and alcohol treatment in this book. But in the novel, there are a number of vigilante groups moving in operation at the time. They're
Hmm.
just kind of in the background doing different things that pop up here and there. So it's definitely a time of unrest where people feel like they have to, take things into their own hands and are operating underground, but more or less out in the open too.
Right.
Um, it's not like, for example, the Make It Stop, which is also the name of the organization. They are operating out of an old yoga studio.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, and while you were writing this, you've said that it seemed like time was kind of catching up as you were writing it. It was sort of getting closer to like a reality. And did you have to kind of change up anything because of that?
I didn't. There are a couple things I wish I could change now.
Right.
But yeah, I had this idea. Uh, I can't remember the exact date, but I started it like a good at least 7 or 8 years before it was published, and I kept, wasn't really satisfied with the way it was coming together, and I'd put it aside and work on these other projects that you alluded to,
Hmm.
and but I kept coming back to it because I felt like there was something really important about the idea.
Mm.
Uh, but the moral of the story is, if you're going to set your dystopian thriller in the near future, then write it quickly because the future has a way of becoming the present.
Yeah, I know, right? And this book is written in it takes place in Los Angeles, which is I think a perfect like canvas for this kind of story. Just the scope and the size of the city and the county. Do you think this book could happen in a place like New York, or how different do you think it would be in a place like that?
Oh no, I feel like, just to kind of back up to give like a thumbnail view of like this idea where it takes place in a world where if you don't pay your hospital bills, you don't get to leave. And so this organization, Make It Stop, has is working against that, trying to free people from these prison hospitals.
Hmm.
And it starts when some of these operatives are having a really bad day. So
Yeah,
it
yeah.
sets things off there. So I absolutely think that corporate healthcare has influenced every aspect of our lives, and it's very much set up as kind of a test case where in a place like LA where there's a lot of disenfranchised people, a lot of vulnerable people, where they can do these things kind of anonymously,
Hmm.
like people like, addicts that they pick up off the street and throwing them in jail. Like who
Yeah.
who who cares about these people? Well, I
Right.
mean, is the idea, and the idea that like, well, we care.
Yeah.
Everybody on some level, cares.
Right.
So to answer your question, I absolutely think that could happen. I don't think it'd be really hard for a vigilante group to spring up in a small town because it'd be
Right.
like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
those troublemakers are at it again. They just call themselves something different this time.
Right.
But I really like, I used to live in LA, so I was familiar, with the city, and I wanted to put some places in LA that maybe um, people who have lived there are familiar with,
Hmm.
but people who are not, don't see in a novel.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
it's
know,
not the typical like Hollywood Boulevard and shit like that.
right,
For sure.
right.
Yeah. D- were you a fan of LA fiction and that kind of stuff? Like a lot of the early authors from LA?
I mean, going back to say Day of the Locust,
Mhm.
Nathaniel West, Day of the Locust, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's never a big Raymond Chandler fan.
Okay.
I even lived like near a street that was named after him. And when I first splash landed in Los Angeles and North Hollywood,
Oh yeah.
I always kind of felt like it was a deficiency. But like when I go back to Raymond Chandler, with maybe the exception of The Big Sleep, the first one, uh, there's not a lot to admire there. I read Raymond Chandler,
Hmm.
and I see like a raging alcoholic.
Yeah.
I mean, he just had this massive ego, and he thought he was even worse than being like, say, like an aristocratic British person. He was an American who grew up and went to British schools, and so he thought he was better educated than all the slobs that working in
Right.
Los Angeles, all the slobs working
Yeah.
in publishing.
Right.
Um, and I read him, more I learn about him, and the more I read him, I just see like this ego run amok, the kind that you know, kind of person I'm trying not to be as a recovering alcoholic myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've been sober now for 15 years, 14 years?
Yeah, 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have
Nice.
to think about it. It's 2009 is when I stopped, the very beginning of 2009.
That's great. So was your were you writing when you were drinking? And has that changed significantly?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, the previous novel was really interesting in that I wrote it was called Forest of Fortune, and it was set in a tribal casino.
Hmm.
And I wrote the first draft. Um, the first couple years I worked on it, I wrote it while I was drinking,
Hmm.
and then I got sober, but I continued to work in that casino. And so I revised it while I was in recovery, and kind of it was almost like having like the blinkers removed and being like, oh,
Yeah.
this is where I work,
Right.
So, but what I found with my writing and my recovery is that, just a release from all the fear and the shame that I was constantly living under. And
Hmm.
that, like, oh God, what did I say to this person? Or, oh, what did I do? Or
Right.
can't remember this sequence, and this kind of fear of things I couldn't even put a name to, which kind of goes all the way back to the beginning of, like, being raised in Catholicism. That's
Right.
like that's every day in Catholicism.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
What I do? Well, you did something,
Yeah.
and he knows, like that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
So to be released from all of that was just amazing. Not just in my writing, and like being more honest and being more fearless,
Hmm.
because I'm of the school that believes that all writers tell on themselves in fiction in one way or another.
Hmm.
But also with my relationship to my community of writers, in that all the garbage that goes with addiction, like the pettiness, the insecurity, um,
Resentment and
it's
jealousy.
resentment being the big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, right. I mean, writers are so fucked up that we will resent like not winning an award in years that we didn't have a book come out.
Right.
I
Right.
win the Pulitzer because your book
Yeah.
came 5 years ago, asshole.
Right.
Like that's where our mind wants to go, and being an
Right.
alcoholic, it really wanted to go and
Yeah.
stay. So just to be relieved of all that, like once I
Yeah.
understood, like resentment was like a one way is just a just like a bullet train to negativity.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not,
It's
yeah.
like, I even started like not resenting like, the enemies of my sports teams and my enemies,
Right.
and like
Yeah.
it's a little goofy, but it's a happier way to live.
Yeah. No, it's not goofy. I think it's a good way to live it. I have a lot of friends in recovery, and that seems to be a theme is, finding out all this stuff that, not having the mystery of like waking up and going, fuck, what did I do last night? And not having that anymore is, yeah, has to be an amazing experience. So it's good. It's good to have you here, buddy.
Thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
there's just like so much dishonesty.
Yeah.
And when you boil it all down, like whether it's a white lie to your boss or where you were or who you were
Yeah.
with, or like it's just like you're just not ever being your full self, and you're all constantly lying about it and
Hmm.
making a habit of it.
Yeah.
And it's when I'm getting past all that, it was like giving permission to be my full self. That I mean, I never really thought of it like that until just now, but
Hmm.
that's exactly what happened. If you look at the books that I published,
You can
um,
see the change and you're like, as you just get more clear and just
well,
more
yeah,
of
there's
your
only
voice.
one, but there's only
Yeah.
one before
Yeah.
I got sober,
Okay. Yeah.
and then all the other ones are afterwards. So
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
it's pretty easy.
Yeah. And so that must have, helped, write this newest book, being where this is, a lot of people in recovery in this book.
Yeah, the previous book, the one I alluded to earlier, Force of Fortune, was very much, someone circling the drain,
Yeah.
someone who was a lot like myself.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that again
Yeah.
and make it stop, which is why I intentionally chose a woman as a protagonist.
Yeah.
And even though like, Melanie is, a very powerful figure, also it's women who are the most vulnerable in today's healthcare,
Yeah.
right? They're
Yeah.
the one whose rights are being trampled on.
Yeah.
So that was also opinion, important to me to have the main character, the one who has responsible for um, you know, all the driving action in it.
Yeah.
And also like it was and she has her own struggles with substances, and it was also like I didn't want to have her be rescued or saved by,
Right.
in fact, just the opposite.
Yeah.
All the men in her life keep letting her down,
Yeah.
which was very relatable from my view.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't too much of a stretch either.
Right. Right. And did you get any pushback from anyone from like writing a main character as a woman, as a man? Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did it. I think just in terms of the authenticity of being in recovery and struggling with it.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's more of a person thing. There's no gender there. You kind of deal with the same experience.
and it's also, you know, one of the inspirations for the book was I love all those um, cheesy television shows where whether they're solving crimes or fighting crime or whatever it is. It's usually like the detective shows.
Yeah.
There's like always like this, they have this headquarters and they all
Yeah.
get together there and they get their orders. And
Right.
there's always a scene where they're like, laying out the case and they're finishing
Right.
each of their sentences. So
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
in the room gets a line. And it's always like, men, women, multi-ethnic. And it's I mean, I just wanted to like have like a big group of people like that, except
Yeah.
they're all kind of fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost reminded me of and I was going to talk about this in a bit, but the Office and Repo Man, of all those guys, it's that same kind of vibe as those like police, where there's just like those fucked up group of people. Um, but the drug in this book, there's a synthetic drug that's invented called Bliss, Cannabis. Is that what it is?
Cannabis.
Which
Yeah.
seems very much an LA drug. Almost, it's almost like a mixture between like ecstasy and I don't know, crack, because it's like a very quick high, right?
yeah, but also like made with like the worst stuff imaginable.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I I always like, and this is the part where I know that I'm never always will be an addict, because when I love reading books where there's like a new drug, like a make believe drug,
yeah.
because there's a part of me that's like, oh man, I wish I could have done that drug.
Right,
Wonder what it would have been like to do, like whatever it is. Like I
right.
just, even if it's totally make believe, like I'm allowed to wonder because there's
Yeah, because it's
no
fake.
chance of it being real. But
Right.
in the early days when I was like conceiving this book, which goes back a ways, um, they're like bath salts were a thing.
Oh yeah,
People were smoking bath salts and having
yeah,
chaotic reactions.
yeah.
But also, Vice was running these stories on Crocodile. Do you
Oh, I
remember?
remember. Yeah, I remember watching one of those. Yeah,
Okay, so Crocodile was this synthetic drug
yeah.
made of all in Russia, made up of all these ingredients that that you could get at any 24-hour pharmacy in
Right.
Russia. And that was, I thought that was also really insidious. That like,
Yeah.
what, 24-hour pharmacies is like who are
Right.
their customers? Well, obviously it's a drugstore. We know
Right.
their customers are addicts.
Yeah.
But the thing is that this drug, they call it crocodile not because of the high, but because what happened to people if they used it
Yeah.
is they would have these abscesses and their skin would get all leathery, and
Yeah.
it was so toxic it would just kill them.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make something that was very like, and if you listen to the ad copy, it's
Hmm.
like really alluring, like, oh wow, it makes me horny and feel good, I'll take
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the other side is like, yeah, but it also might make your arm fall off,
Yeah. Yeah.
um and there comes a point for every addict, they're like, yeah, that's okay, yeah, I can deal with one arm, or I
Yeah.
don't need a family, I don't need society or anything.
Yeah. And then there's the healthcare CEO guy, Derek Hansen,
Hmm.
who did you model him after anyone in particular, or just sort of that kind of guy that we all know, the, like
Well,
weird
what do you
eccentric.
mean by a guy that we all know?
I guess like an eccentric CEO, although he was, I don't know if he's really eccentric. He's kind of a fucked up guy.
Well, I wasn't really a model, but like the person I kept imagining was Gary Oldman's character in The Professional,
Oh yeah, okay.
who is this guy who just kind of seems like he's barely holding it together, like he cannot believe the incompetence of the people around him.
Yeah,
And every once in a while, he just loses his shit.
yeah, yeah,
I think that's basically, yeah, that's the model for Hanson.
yeah, yeah. Um, and so while you were writing this book, you were also writing the Bad Religion book as well.
Mhm.
And how was that having to go back and forth between doing that? I mean, it was like between having to do research and interviews and then having to get back into like creating this world.
Well, it's like, I mean, I had the world, I had the idea.
Yeah,
I just felt like the way that I was executing it was just not, it just wasn't cutting it.
yeah,
And part of it was I felt like um this is a serious issue. This is, about corporations and recovery and the most vulnerable people. It needs to be
yeah,
important. But at the same time, it also like the way I was approaching it was like, sometimes it's a horror movie, sometimes it's a comedy, sometimes it's, you
yeah,
mentioned Repo Man. It has like, a little bit of that feeling of like being several genres at the same time, and the way
yeah,
that living in LA can feel like several genres at the same time.
yeah,
And so it wasn't really a matter of working. I mean, I didn't slave over this book for 8 years. I just work on it. I'd be yeah, like, yeah, that's not it. And I put it aside
yeah,
and think I come back to it, and I would. And but it wasn't I did that more with um Corporate Rock Sucks, Rise and Fall of SST Records.
yeah,
That one was a pandemic project.
Yeah.
And with the SST book, I was um, working on it at night. I had a
Yeah.
friend in Massachusetts, and we were trading chapters of our novels.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that to figure out, he had written a screenplay and he was turning it into a novel.
Hmm.
Turned my novel into like a TV series,
Yeah.
and it's gonna sound a little insane, but it's just like, I wrote like 5 or 6 episodes, blocking out the whole novel,
Yeah.
because I just wanted to. I knew that there were things that were just not working in the book, and so when I turned it in, I did the first 50, 75 pages into a pilot.
Hmm.
You're writing for TV, or the screen. There's just nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
Realize, well, shit, I got a lot of people just sitting around in cars, like smoking and
Right.
talking. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
bullshit, kind of
Yeah.
boring. So once I realized that, I was able to like lean into the settings a little bit more, have
Hmm.
people doing different things. Of course, there's a lot of dialogue, but like not just on a phone or in a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I was going through the process of converting it back into the novel, I was trading chapters with his friend,
Hmm.
and I would work on that in the evenings.
Yeah.
It was during COVID. We were all during the lockdown. We were stuck at home. I would research the SST book, whatever chapter I was working on during the day. I'd work on it in the afternoon, and then after dinner, when the whole family was home, then we went back to our rooms or back to our computers.
Yeah.
I would mess around with the novel, and
Right.
that's how it got its final form. And I also got really good notes from the publisher once I did find a home for it,
Yeah.
which kind of took it to the what I felt was like the next level that made me feel like, okay, I can let this go now.
Yeah. 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 That must have felt good to finally get it completed.
It's just too easy for, I think I mean, I know a lot of musicians and other people who do other kinds of things other than writing. It's just, it's not that it's hard to know when it's ready. It's just
Hmm.
hard to go.
Yeah. 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 I've done music before, and you just want to, and a lot of times you just don't want to put something out that to you seems half-assed or it's missing something. So you sometimes you just take time to do that. And do you find it helps to work with someone else's having someone else's eyes on stuff that you're creating?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I worked in advertising for many years. I worked at an ad agency. And that's a place where people are not really sentimental about, edits, revisions.
Yeah.
Like in like the whole in like the story workshop, um, I was gonna say business, but I guess it's
Right.
business. In that industry,
Yeah.
there's saying like don't bleed on the page when you're giving feedback to a writer, especially a young writer.
Hmm.
Don't use a red pen. It can be too, it can be too harmful. Don't bleed on the page.
Right.
My boss at the agency, she would write in a fucking Sharpie.
Yeah.
I never turned in copy that was like, you know, that's brilliant, Jim. Print it,
Yeah.
because it was stuff that was going to be on billboards or on radio or mailed into like 200,000 pieces of mail. I mean, it's
Right.
like, I mean, definitely high stakes for that world.
Yeah.
So I learned not to be precious about feedback. It's not about whether it's good or not, it's about whether it works.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you think you'll write more on this? The book seemed like it could have more to that story. You think you would write another book from this world or a sequel to that?
I mean, I think about it a lot. Um, it's a yes, no kind of answer. And that, the no would be well, the yes would be that there's just so many stories in this world.
Yeah.
And every year there's just like another major scandal.
Right.
And um,
Or every week at this
yeah,
point.
I mean, they're like the New York Times did this expose on on a mental hospital that wouldn't let patients lead until like their insurance had been bled dry.
Yeah.
Sounded very familiar to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, there was a huge scandal in Arizona with like the Arizona population where they were like
Yeah.
defrauding the government and just using all basically just using all the money, and even in some cases giving patients fentanyl
Yeah.
just just to keep them as patients, which is
Right.
just
Yeah.
so
It's,
immoral. How do you get to that kind of point?
yeah.
And
It's
then
fucked up.
the big one, of course, is Luigi.
Yeah.
I can't believe we went however many minutes into this conversation without talking about
I know.
Luigi. I mean, I only wrote a book about healthcare vigilantes, and then Luigi happens.
I know. Yeah.
Uh, um, so I was kind of hoping, that a forward-thinking movie producer would make me a bazillionaire overnight and
Yeah.
turn the movie into something. But I'm 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 being funny, but I definitely think there's something there.
Yeah. I think so.
People, I get asked a lot about influences, and the first one that I always mention is Fight Club,
Yeah.
and because of Project Mayhem,
Yeah.
and the whole idea of this underground movement to fight back against things that are just wrong,
Wrong. Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
The movie ends with blowing up this credit agency so that the credit records of all these people are destroyed,
Yeah.
which is very quaint twilight of the 20th century moment, because now all that shit's in the cloud. You're gonna have to go
I
blow
know.
up a
I
server
know.
farm
A
in the
server
Philippines.
farm. Yeah.
But that idea was like immensely appealing.
Yeah.
And then 9/11 happened, and the idea of blowing up anything would, you
Yeah.
talk about it for more than 2 minutes, you end up on a
On a
list.
list. Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I would love to write about, healthcare vigilantes in 2025 or 2026.
Yeah.
What would be is that, um, I've written two novels and most of a third since then,
Yeah.
and none of them are sequels.
Right.
I'm not saying no, but just not now.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, how important is writing for you? You write pretty much daily. I mean, you're writing for the LA Times, the Substack, and lots of stuff, right? Of
Yeah,
Razorcake.
I write for Razorcake,
Yeah.
which is now I've been in damn near every issue of Razorcake,
Yeah.
times a year for 25 years. Pretty
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah.
Wrote for Flipside before that, and
Yeah.
the Substack called Message from the Underworld. I do that every week, and I love it.
Yeah.
Uh, just a way to talk about music and books about music, and
Yeah.
it's like the different things. Like every time I read a book, or if I like, let's say I cover an event, like when I went to punk rock bowling,
Yeah.
there's a story that I turn in for the LA Times, and then there's like the other story, like not
Right.
like really happened, but just like it's the fun stuff behind the scenes that
Yeah.
in some ways is more interesting than the story itself. But
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
um, so I like doing that, and but if I'm not, I'm always have projects, and I really enjoy. I have a real passion for writing,
Yeah.
and I think that I don't know what I would do without it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I luckily I'm so busy I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Uh, but like like my idea of like like I've been working freelance since I got basically let go from my job in 2018,
Yeah.
and so there's like there's definitely that hustle mentality you have to have so that you're
Yeah.
not staring at the ceiling at night wondering
Right.
how you're going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
um, but for me, like the idea of like retirement or vacation or taking time off is like eliminating other things,
Yeah. Yeah.
the writing,
Yeah.
like, wow, what if I never had to sweep another floor, like
Right.
that thing.
Yeah.
uh,
And you seem to when you travel, you write about it, and so you get more. You can just be creative and get more thought provoking stuff happening. When you're.
oh yeah, there's no substitute like travel and live music. There's no
Yeah.
substitute for it.
Yeah. Um, the part in your Substack, Orca Alert, which I
Yeah.
really like. So I had a couple ones on here I wanted to talk about. There's this, the ancient city of Los Abuelos, Guatemalan city.
Yep.
Um, that's a pretty crazy story. And when I heard about it, when I read that, I was thinking this would this could make like a Repo Man-esque, just these statues of this, what do they call them, the grandparents or the
Hmm.
found these. So can you can you explain that story for someone that wouldn't know?
Okay, well, I'm obsessed with ancient cities, especially in North America.
Okay.
And and that line in Repo Man is like, people are obsessed with weirdness, how the Mayans invented television, all that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Mayans didn't invent television, but they did build some beautiful cities. And Christian, there are a shitload of cities underneath the forests in the Yucatan Peninsula,
Hmm.
uh, going down from Mexico down to Guatemala. Like, there's so much there,
Yeah.
and part of it is that the government doesn't have the money or the infrastructure to like uncover it all
Yeah.
and just preserve it. Like there are so many ruins and old cities that it's a challenge to take care of all the ones that they have. Like, if you go to like Yucatan Peninsula, there might be three or four or five or six, big sites on the map that have like, like a gift shop,
Yeah.
but there are dozens that are on the map
Yeah.
and open and close, but when you go there, there's nobody there.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's you and the iguanas and the ancient, carvings, and it's fucking amazing.
Yeah. So you've
Um,
traveled down there?
I have.
Some of these, yeah.
So I'm really interested in that region and that area, but like also just this idea that of like this, we always talk about American exceptionalism, but also like I think there's a temporal component to that now, that like we're so advanced now when, well, obviously we're not, which this whole catastrophe of Trump's second term in office has
Yeah.
shown,
Yeah.
that we're really, you know, reverting back to a subspecies, if
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, we have this technology that is making all these amazing discoveries. And I love reading these stories where it's like, oh, well, they found this, shoe or a sword or a skull,
Right.
which changes the timeline of when we thought people were here or
Yeah.
when people started using tools.
Right.
And it's not by like a week or two, but like, oh, like people were using, we thought people used tools up until like last year, like 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, now they found a tool that's 15,000 years old. So it's
Yeah.
like, that's a,
That's
that's like,
insane.
sorry, 20,000 years old. That's a 15,000 year jump.
Yeah.
Like, and that shit happens every week. I mean, we don't know anything about anything.
Mm.
And, we don't know about our past. We don't know about our place in the universe.
Yeah.
Um, and we don't really know a lot about the present moment either,
Yeah.
because corporations don't want us to.
Yeah.
They want us to be distracted.
Yeah. I know. Um, the other story on there, was a recent one was Tamara Lanier, who sued Harvard,
Mm-hmm.
um, to obtain, and I wasn't familiar with this word, daguerreotypes. Is that how
Yeah.
you pronounce that? So what is that exactly?
So it's a forerunner of photographic plates.
Hmm.
Uh, I think like some of the stuff that Matthew Brady used to take photos of the Civil War dead
Oh,
uh,
okay.
are using the same process.
Hmm.
It's similar. It's the same process as taking a photo, but it's just like how you capture the image,
Okay.
which I really technically I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
when it comes
Um,
to like hard sciences, I know like less than nothing.
yeah. Yeah. Um, so she
But
sued Harvard,
uh,
to obtain, those from her, it says her enslaved ancestors, and she says, I firmly believe, and I wrote about this in my book, that the elders didn't trust the history books to tell our stories. So what they did is embed our history, our legacy, our journey in the hearts and in the minds of the young, telling them to always remember, never forget. So how important is this, especially now where, history, especially for, African Americans, is being either, whitewashed or erased? How important do you think it is to have stuff documented in print, where is since the oral tradition seems to be going away with, younger
Oh,
people.
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's hugely important. And I also think it's really important for it to be documented, on paper,
Mm,
because, I don't think there's anyone who's, writing alive who was alive when the internet came online that believes that the internet's forever anymore.
right.
It's not.
Yeah.
I mean, something stays in print as long as somebody's credit card is active and make sure it stays in print. And
Yeah.
we know that that's not very long in terms of the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Like so yeah, nothing is held, and now more than ever, like the internet is, like just a shitty place to be, a shitty place to do research, a shitty place to learn anything.
Yeah.
It's a shitty place to fucking find a place to eat chicken wings in your neighborhood,
I know.
because like some algorithm will be like, oh well, here's a place that paid us money that's 40 miles away. You should
Right.
check out. And it's just
Yeah.
like, fuck you,
Yeah.
It's just awful. I'm getting off the subject there a little
No, no,
bit.
that's all right.
As someone who's like, I got my start writing in zines, so it's natural for me to be nostalgic about zines. But there's a paper record. It's there. It's a history,
Yeah.
and as punk rockers, it's our history.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it ever makes it online for somebody else to control whether
Yeah.
you see it or not.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
We made it for ourselves, and we don't care if anyone else finds out about it.
Yeah.
And these are the values of Todd Taylor and Sean Carswell, who started the zine 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was never an idea of like, let's see how big we can get,
Yeah.
because then or how big our reach can be, or how many followers we can get.
Right.
Like they want all the problems that come with that, and there are a shitload of problems.
Yeah.
Their idea wasn't to make something big so that it becomes too big and the only thing to do is sell it,
Yeah.
which is kind of like basically the whole neoliberal goal, is to make something so large that you have to sell it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, when you were mentioning before a friend in Massachusetts, it wasn't, I have a friend that writes for Razorcake from here, Michael Fournier.
Yep.
That's not the same guy, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's it. All right. Yeah. So
Yeah,
he's a
he wrote Double Nickels
yeah.
on
Yeah.
time for 33 and a third,
Yeah.
and is a novelist. He has a new novel out.
Yeah. Yeah. He did this podcast early on.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Um, and then so you've been writing a lot of you kind of go between that and music. So you went to punk rock bowling, and I love the stuff you wrote about that. And you said you took your daughter to this
Yes,
festival. Is she a music person?
she is.
Yeah.
And I'm really fascinated by the way that she finds music and uses music and experiences music. And I mean, she's my daughter, so I learned from her very early on, that she is like, in all the ways that I can be obstinate and stubborn and ornery, that why would it be any different with her, right?
Right.
So if we were in the car, I'm playing my music, but I also am not trying to sell her on how good it is, because she wasn't having it.
Yeah.
She didn't like the music I was listening to, because it was constantly changing, but also, she was not one of those people that's like, gonna pretend to like punk rock to appease her dad.
Yeah.
But there's music that she found that she liked and she
Yeah.
recognized from those worlds. And also, like, I mean, she does obviously have some soft spots. Like, she's known, she met Keith Morris when she was like, 10,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So So obviously she's met him over the years, and
Right.
she's a fan of like the Descendants and L7 and um Fiddler, which I don't judge her too much for yet. Um,
Yeah.
and but other things. So it was like, I know I can't force things on her. We just like, what bands do you want to see? Here's what I want to see, and then we just compare notes afterwards.
Nice.
And so I'm actually working on an essay specifically about that, about
Oh,
the
nice.
um, and so I'll be sharing that on the Substack once it gets published.
Nice. And you saw Channel 3 there, I saw. I
I
just
did,
I just bought Mike's, and I saw your interview with him today. Think you put that up today, right?
I did. Yep,
Yeah. That was the first punk band I ever saw in
it was. Tell me about that show.
it was January 30th of 1984
Wow.
with the band Kraut at this place at the Channel in Boston.
Okay.
And but I had just gotten into punk rock probably 6 months before that, but more into, the Dead Kennedys and Black Flag, and but friends were going to this show. I didn't really know them and didn't really get their records until later, Channel 3. But yeah, it was fun. It was, I was immediately sold, and just, that first experience of, being into like stuff like Kiss and bigger bands and these, artists that you're never gonna. Well, my dad was in the music business, so I lived a little different life, and I did get to meet a lot of bigger stars. But most, people would put those people up on a pedestal, and they weren't approachable. You're not going to walk up to Robert Plant or something. But so I always thought that was cool when I first started going to these punk shows, that they're just the guy's wearing the same thing he was wearing walking out of the van out in the parking lot.
Yeah,
So, um, and one of your first shows was the Ramones.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in the Northern Virginia suburbs,
Hmm.
and so I had been to some big like stadium. Well, had I at that point? I'm not even sure if I had, but I got into the Ramones. It was my brother who had one of their records, and we listened to it on his record player.
Yeah.
And so I immediately started going out and buying all the tapes and listening to on my knockoff Walkman. When I was a newspaper boy, I delivered the Washington Post. So I'd walk
Okay.
around the neighborhood and I listened to the Ramones and Devo, but Ramones just like, I just loved it.
Yeah.
And we heard they were coming to play at a place called the Wax Museum in Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
And they had a thing where you could get in if you were with an adult, like an R-rated movie, right?
Yeah.
So we begged our mom to take us, and she took us.
Nice.
And I think it's maybe because it helped that they were from New York,
Hmm.
New Yorker, and but I really don't know why. I know that she like almost got thrown out because she kept climbing up on the bar stools trying to take pictures,
Oh,
and so I think that's pretty funny that she documented it. But
yeah.
yeah, that was yeah. It's why weird to
Yeah.
think. It was 1985,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
it's not like I'm not, we're not talking CBGBs,
Right. Right. Yeah.
75. It was
Yeah.
a bit later.
Yeah. Do those pictures still exist?
They do, but I remember thinking they were all terrible then. So I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So how was Channel 3 now?
Channel 3 was great.
Yeah.
They played like there was pool party
Yeah.
the night before the festival. This thing gets bigger every year.
Yeah.
And and they played. And I can't remember the name that the band played before them, but Channel 3 were great.
Yeah.
Um and Mike is just like his book. And our paths had never crossed before, so it was really kind of interesting to meet someone that's you know um has like he's a very like literary minded
Yeah.
in the way he approached the book. He thought about like the voice and how to put it together. He wasn't just he struggled with that book for a number of years, as the interview said, like
Yeah.
thinking about how to present it. And he's working on another one.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that.
I just liked him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me, he's very, like you said, approachable.
Yeah, I put that at the top of my to read because I bought the book a while back when he released it, and but after reading that today and reading about how you had said it was like written in this like very literary voice and written in
Yeah,
sort of different than just like a typical tour diary. So it
yeah,
sounds interesting.
yeah.
Just like
It's
to check that out.
I'm a big fan of that. If you're like whenever there's a journey,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to tell it in pieces. Don't just like,
Yeah.
and then that way when you break away from it and you come back, you're a little bit further down the road. It's just
Yeah.
like a really nice cinematic way of taking the boring parts out.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. And just, I feel like doing stuff a little different than just the typical, like, and then we did this. And then we, it is nice to mix it up and have a different voice. That's kind of what I've been trying to do with this podcast with a lot of musicians and just trying to talk about different stuff that they may not. That's why I was glad you asked, what I wanted to talk about with this, because I did want to talk about this book, and because I figure you've probably been asked about Bad Religion and how cool Keith Morris is a million times. So it's nice to talk about all this other stuff with you. So,
No,
um,
I
but
appreciate it because,
yeah,
like I work with these other projects with people, but the novels are my baby. And,
yeah,
um, I would still do the punk rock books, even if like, I got, compensated the same amount to write my novels. But,
yeah, yeah,
you know, I do wish that it would, I could focus on them more.
yeah, yeah, definitely. The SST book, I loved that book, and did you discover a lot about that label that you didn't know? And like a lot of the
Oh,
art, there's so many weird artists on that label that I'm a fan of the podcast. I think you've been on there, the Welcome to Mojack.
you don't know Mojack.
You don't know Mojack. I love those guys.
Yeah, yeah,
But some
absolutely.
I feel bad for them though. I'm like, you guys got to listen to all those. There's just a lot of stuff in there that's a tough listen, but some
It's
great stuff too. Like
some
you said,
great
like
stuff, some diamonds in the rough. And then also, as you know, they talk about everything. They talk
yeah,
about their music obsessives,
yeah,
and you know, they, you know, they've forgotten more about music than I'll ever know.
yeah. I know. Yeah, I love they're two completely different personalities, but they work together, perfectly. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah. Um, so yeah, I appreciate you doing this for me, man.
You're very
And
welcome.
so if people want to find your stuff, how can they do that?
So, Message from the Underworld is my Substack newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday. It's free. And then there's like, if you're a paid subscriber, then you also get, on most Sundays, a weekly roundup of links, of dealing with all the kinds of weird culture, science, history, crime, and killer whales. Stuff like that I find fascinating. Um, if I'm traveling a lot, then I don't put one of those out on a Sunday because I'm not reading news articles if I'm
Right.
traveling. You
Yeah.
know, I'm usually reading those things when I should be working, but I like seeking out stories about like whatever the James Webb Space Telescope is doing, as
Yeah.
opposed to the latest thing that floats out of Trump's mouth that he
Yeah. You're right. Whatever.
hadn't been thinking about more than 24 hours before.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
all this great science and history that's like being discovered and uncovered, and
Yeah.
um, and it's all out there if you seek it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then um, I have there's a book that's coming out in the fall that by Evan Dando called
Mm-hmm.
Rumors of My Demise, and I helped Evan with that story.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So that's coming out as a Boston guy.
Yeah.
Uh, that should resonate with
Yeah.
you a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah. I was a
because
fan of his stuff.
there's all like, were you a fan of it, the early Lemonheads?
Yeah. Yeah. Hate Your Friends and Licky. No, what's it called?
Lick,
Fucking
that's right.
Lick.
Yeah,
Yeah. Lick. Yeah.
when they were
Um, but
when they
I
were
love It's a Shame About
saying,
Ray. I love that record too. When the first couple major label records I loved.
yeah,
Great
well,
songwriter.
Evan's first punk rock show was also at the channel. So
Yeah, yeah. So is this sort of a memoir type thing?
yeah,
Oh, okay. Interesting. Oh, yeah, that'll be interesting. He's I have a lot of mutuals with him, so I'm sure there's some good stuff in there.
he's been working on it for a long, long time. So
Yeah,
it's and now he's got a new record and a new single, and
yeah.
uh, that's really good. And it's all happening.
Awesome. Great. That's great, man. Keep it up. I enjoy your stuff, and I hope the listener seeks out your stuff here because it's some great stuff.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Very welcome.
Have a good night.
You too.